You've been there. You finish a great meal, the check arrives, and you pull out your card. But have you ever really stopped to wonder how much the person who just served you actually makes? Today, we're digging into the real numbers behind one of the most common and maybe one of the most misunderstood jobs in America.
So let me just ask you this straight up. Could the person bringing you your food be pulling in a six-figure salary? I know, it sounds pretty wild, right? But it's a claim that you actually hear more often than you think.
And look, this isn't just some hypothetical. We found this comment on a Reddit thread where a user says, point blank, their husband works at a fine dining spot where servers are making around $100,000 to $120,000 a year. Okay, now that's a claim we have to investigate.
So, what's the real deal? Is this the norm, or is it a total 1 in a million outlier? We're going to call this the six-figure server myth. Let's break down where all this money actually comes from and see if it's a dream or a reality for most people in the industry.
The truth is, a server's income is this tangled web of competing forces. You've got base wages, you've got tips, it matters where you work, it matters what the local laws are, and all of that just creates this huge gap between what we think they make and what they actually take home.
To really get our heads around this, we have to start with the basics. It really all boils down to a two-part system. There's the wage they get paid by the restaurant, and then there are the tips they get from you, the customer.
And that brings us to a really important legal term, the tipped wage. Now, this is not your standard minimum wage. It's a special lower base pay specifically for employees who are expected to make up the difference with tips.
Okay, get ready for the number that shocks almost everyone. The federal minimum cash wage for tipped employees is just $2.13 an hour. I'm not kidding, and that number has not changed since 1991, over 3 decades ago.
Now hold on, legally speaking, a server isn't taking home just $2 an hour. That's because of a rule called the tip credit. Essentially what it means is if a server's base wage plus all their tips doesn't add up to the full federal minimum wage, that's $7.25 an hour, the employer has to pay the difference. So that's the absolute floor.
So just how much do servers really rely on those tips? Well, a lot. According to data from the payment system Toast, tips make up almost 60% of a server's total earnings. The base wage isn't even half of their paycheck. It just goes to show you their take-home pay is directly tied to the customer.
All right, so we've established that tips are king. But think about it. A 20% tip on a $10 check is very different from a 20% tip on a $400 check. The type of restaurant a server works in is probably the single biggest factor in how much they can earn.
And this table right here makes that difference crystal clear. Look at fine dining. A server there could walk away with $400 in tips on a good night, putting their potential annual salary over $56,000. Now compare that to a casual dining spot, where the ceiling is just so much lower. It's simple math. The bigger the bill, the bigger the tip.
But it's not just about how fancy the restaurant is. There are a bunch of other huge factors. The state you live in can change everything because the laws are so different. Working a Saturday night shift versus a Tuesday lunch is a completely different world. And of course, the server's own skills, upselling, providing great service, that all plays a massive role.
Let's just focus on that location factor for a second, because it is a game changer. On one side, you have that federal standard we talked about, $2.13 an hour. But then you have a state like California. Servers there get paid the full state minimum wage, over $16 an hour, before a single tip is even counted. That creates a totally different financial reality, and 6 other states have similar laws.
But the complexity doesn't stop there. We also have to look at the kind of nerdy legal and tax rules that define what a tip even is. Yeah, it's not as simple as just the cash you leave on the table.
Now, this is a critical distinction that a lot of people miss. A true tip is voluntary. You decide to pay it, you decide how much, and it belongs to the employee, period. But a service charge, like that automatic 18% gratuity for a big party, that's mandatory. Legally, that money belongs to the business. If they decide to share it with the staff, it gets treated as a regular wage, not a tip.
And what about tip pools, where all the tips are shared among the staff? Well, there are strict federal rules for that, too. The money can only be shared with other employees who regularly get tips, like bartenders or bussers. The whole point of the law is to keep managers and supervisors from taking a cut of the employee's earnings.
So with all of that context, the different wages, restaurant types, and all these rules, let's circle all the way back to where we started, that 6-figure server in New York City. Is it actually possible?
Well, the hard data gives us a starting point. According to Oysterlink, the average salary for a fine dining server in New York City is just under $63,000 a year. Now that's a very good living for sure, but it's not quite 6 figures, is it?
But here's the thing about that word average. It can hide the dramatic swings of real life. It almost never tells the whole story.
As another Redditor points out, a server's income is super seasonal. This person says in December, with all the holiday parties, their husband is making a killing, but they barely see him. Then, in the slow summer months, he's always around. A server's annual income is a roller coaster, not a flat line.
In getting one of those top-tier jobs, it isn't easy. As this user points out, the competition is fierce. You can't just walk into some high-end Manhattan restaurant and expect to land a job. You have to earn your way up in one of the most competitive markets in the world.
So here's the crucial takeaway. Yes, a six-figure income is absolutely possible for a server, but it's reserved for the elite few, the ones working at the very top restaurants in a major city who can navigate those seasonal cash flows and outwork the intense competition. It is the exception, not the rule.
So, the six-figure server isn't a total myth, but they are a rare breed. It's a powerful reminder that behind a simple meal is this whole complex economy of wages, laws, and location. It's definitely more than just a job, but whether it can be a sustainable career, well, that's the real question. Something to think about the next time you're deciding on that tip.